Welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Dye. Today on the show, we have Lydia Walker. She is just a delight. You're going to love this episode. Lydia shares about being a third child growing up in this beautiful, kind, service-oriented family in the church, and just how she struggled to find her identity and her purpose as the third child. And she talks about living with one foot in the church and one foot in the world, and ultimately seeking to find her purpose and identity in the world. Lydia brings this all back to such a beautiful truth of finding that identity so assuredly in Christ alone. And she shares also her passion for ministry. I cannot wait for you to hear her story. But before we dive into that, I want to share a couple of partners with you today. When you find yourself or a family member in need of an x-ray or a scan, researching where to go is likely the last thing on your mind. That's why you need to know about Northeast Imaging. Northeast Imaging is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They offer MRI, CT, x-ray, and ultrasound. They have a friendly staff who is committed to focus on high-quality scans and intentional care to the patient, plus they're preferring providers. And listen, it doesn't matter if you're using your health insurance or paying cash. Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. The facility is conveniently located at 1703 Lemmy Lane in Monroe. They are open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. Y'all know spring is nearly here. That means sports season, spring trips, lots of running the roads. Not to worry, Chevron's loyalty program app is here to help. You may have heard people talk about how they're getting discounts on gasoline. Well, this is how. It's super easy to set up, and new users will receive 25 cents off per gallon, yes, per gallon, up to 25 gallons for the first 5 uses when you download the app. Plus, each time you use the app, you're earning 5 points per gallon that can be redeemed for future discounts, ranging from 5 cents to 50 cents. You can even get additional in-store purchases for earning additional points. Right now, local users are saving 13 cents per gallon. Best part is the app is completely free to you and very user-friendly. So what are you waiting for? Go to the App Store on your phone, type in Chevron Rewards, and download the Chevron app to start saving today. And now, to share with you my conversation with Lydia. Well, welcome to the Saltworks podcast, Lydia.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so fun. We actually had to stop our conversation so we could start recording.
Yes.
Because you were interviewing me. You were asking me questions, and I was like, wait, stop.
I know. It's been like, we've been for like 30 minutes, and I'm just like, tell me more about this.
I think I told you my life story, every house I've ever lived in and why. Sorry about that. I don't do that to everyone.
No, I came in here curious. I was like, tell me more about you.
That's hilarious. I love it. Well, for those of you that don't know you, who is Lydia Walker?
Well, Lydia Walker. I am married to Reeves Walker.
Mm-hmm.
We've been married for a little over 2 years now, and he's my best friend. I just love him.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people know Reeves, so that's a good little connecting point.
Yeah.
I work for FCA in Northeast Louisiana, primarily working at ULM with college students, and I started doing that straight out of college. So I've been doing that for a little over 3 years now.
Yeah, I didn't know that you had been doing it that long.
It's crazy.
At your notes. That's awesome.
It's crazy. The time has gone by so fast,
Yeah.
and I love it so much. Also a part of LO Worship, which is a worship team affiliated with Live Original, and I love that. Get to do that with Reeves, which is so special.
That is so fun.
And yeah, I guess those are the 3 main points about me.
Yeah.
Right
lots
now.
more.
We'll get into more.
Yes, lots more. No, that's awesome. Okay, so childhood, you grew up in a Christian family. You have a wonderful family.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just all the sweetest. We need to have them all on the Saltworks.
Yes.
But you grew up in a Christian home. What did that look like?
Yeah. And it's so funny because if a lot of people also might know my family, and people still, I didn't fully change my name after getting married for a while. Because
Reeves actually called you out on his episode.
He did. Because if you know, it's a lot of work. And it's hard. I sat in line at the DMV for like 2 hours. Yeah. And then when I got up there, I was missing one thing. And I was like, I give up.
Yeah.
I give up. And so I didn't.
It wasn't meant to be.
And so a lot of people call me Lydia Dozier Walker. which that's not actually the name that I legally changed it to. I kept my middle name, but it's just funny. And
I kept both.
You did?
I have 4 names.
You kept 4
names? I couldn't part with either one.
I know, and but I feel like Dozier will always be a part, even if it's legally not a part, you know, because I did have such an amazing family. I do have such an amazing family, and so I grew up going to church every single Sunday, every single Wednesday, you know, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. My parents are amazing, incredible people. I have an older brother and an older sister who are also incredible people.
You're the third.
I'm the baby.
Okay, I never put that together. I'm the third, so
I'm the baby of the family. And yeah, my brother and sister, my sister's 4 years older than me, and then my brother's 6 years, so I was the baby. And we all just grew up in church. I mean, from the moment I can remember, that was just our life. And all of us, my parents, I remember from also a very young age, they were always involved in whatever stage of ministry like we were in at that time.
Yes.
And so when like my siblings got to, you know, like when we were in children's ministry, like they were in children's ministry with us. And I remember my mom like was my VBS leader every year and like, you know, things like that. And like Awanas, like we were always all in it.
Gotta love Awanas.
I've
forgotten about it.
I still think about Awanas because that was the way that we memorized scripture when we were kids.
Bring back the patches.
Yes, it was amazing. And like Bible trivia games. Did you go to you know what I'm talking about where you would have like the paddle and like I know this verse.
Yeah.
And so involved in so many things like that. And then my siblings and I, all of us, we all got involved with serving at our churches also from a very young age. I remember when we started going to North Monroe, Elise started leading worship at North Monroe when she was like 13 or something.
So I don't think I've ever told you this, but I wasn't Elise's small group leader at a D now, but I was in the same house because they had such a big group of, I think she was in 8th grade, maybe 7th. It was my first year to be a D now leader, and I think I was like a freshman in a freshman in college, and she was in a different group, but they had us all in the same house, but there was like probably 15. I don't know how they had 15 8th grade girls, but we would be together in a big group sometimes, and I can remember her being like, somebody was like, "Oh, Elise can sing," and trying to get her to sing in front of like 14 people, you know, and she would not. Yeah. And so it was so neat to see her, you know, step into that. Yes.
And we both still deal with that. We laugh about it. And we were just laughing about it before, like getting so nervous before doing something. And me and Elise
she's got new trauma now. Because I stole her microphone at the last women's event.
If you know, you know.
It was so bad. Go watch my video on Instagram for the full backstory, but
it was so funny. So bad. But either way, even still, like she was always nervous. I was always nervous, but she started leading from such a young age. And then my brother also, he started speaking, like he started preaching like for youth group when he was like in 9th grade, which, you know, that's just crazy too. And so I always had my parents and my siblings to look up to a ton. Like I looked up to, I saw the way that they were serving the Lord, and I really looked up to it. But then if I'm being totally honest, it also was so intimidating for me to think I'm about to have to live up to this too, you know? Yeah. And that was kind of like where like a struggle of like, how am I going to live up to this, which was never an expectation that was put on me at all. But naturally, like that was just kind of my fear. It was like, okay, how am I going to live up to like these amazing people? Because they are amazing. And, you know, that was just kind of a fear that just creeped into my mind from a young age. And
absolutely. Well, and I can think about, you know, the girl listening right now that's like, Lydia's ever been intimidated? You know what I mean? But like, that's encouraging because we do all feel that in some ways, you know, and like the pressure, like you said, doesn't have to come from an external place.
Right. No.
But we feel it. We create these expectations for ourselves. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So I love that. Going into middle school and high school, you're still serving, you're still plugged in. When did you start to feel like a shift? Like, okay, well, like, let me see what the world has to offer. You know, like, what's going on over here? What did that look like for you?
It's almost like, and I don't want to make this sound like it's an excuse, but it's almost like because of how intimidated I felt, I almost was like, let me just do the total opposite. Like, let me just see what else.
If I can't amount here, then maybe I'll just do something totally different.
Yes. And also, like, that's not to say that my siblings didn't have their own struggles, because they 100% too, and that's their story to tell. But it was almost like that intimidation. I was like, well, I'm not going to be as perfect as them, because at that time that's how I felt. Again, that's not how it was, but I felt like that. And so I was like, so let me do me, let me see what that looks like too. And so I did. In middle school and high school, I started serving too. I started leading worship at the youth group, and so every single Sunday I was serving, or every single Wednesday I was serving. And then I was still in church, because at this point I'm still a kid. So I'm going when my family's going. I'm in church every chance the door's open. But then in high school is when I kind of just, again, instead of feeling like I have to amount, I was like, I'm not going to amount. And so why try? And so that's when I started dating. And that was really when I was like, okay, I knew right from wrong. I had been raised to know right from wrong. I knew that Jesus was the answer, but I kind of made that decision. I'm about to try something else. And so I just put my identity in boys, really, was where that identity shift happened.
Well, and also, like, you're also, like, I can hear, like, in the way you're telling it, like, you're putting adult thoughts on your middle school self. Like, you're probably not consciously thinking, yeah, Jesus is the answer, but I'm gonna go this other way.
Right.
Like,
No.
it looks like promise over here. It looks good.
Yeah. It looks fun.
It looks like zero pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can't fail at this.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so, I mean, I started dating, and that was, I guess that is true, because at the time it wasn't like a conscious, like, decision. I mean, it was, but I wasn't thinking of it that way.
Right.
Of like, I'm about to choose this, but I just fully put all of my identity and hope in the relationship that I was in, which I feel like so many girls find themselves in that spot.
Even into adulthood.
100%.
You can do that with a good marriage.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And so, for a long time it was kind of just like the teeter-tottering of like, I'm not going to fully go into the world, but I'm also clearly not fully in with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of living like both. And from the outside looking in, I looked like I was one of the good girls too, like I looked like I was doing all the right things. And even like one of my first boyfriends, I remember, like, he was like, you're too good. Like, you're good. And I remember being like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't want to be too good. Like, and so then it's like, that's where it got blurry, is like, well, I don't want to be too good, like, because I'm thinking, like you said, I'm looking and I'm like, I want him to love me. I want him to want me. I want, and so that was where the line got blurry. And I just kind of, again, that right from wrong, which I knew what was right from wrong, I started to just kind of turn down the wrong path of like, okay, let's just see what this leads to.
Well, I was thinking about this because we're studying Galatians in my life group right now. And we just were in chapter 5 yesterday, Lindsay, chapter 5. And it's the verse. I love this verse. Like, you are running so well. Who hindered you? Like, it's not the voice who called you, just pulling that out of like, who told you this? Like, who told you these things were required? And for the Galatians, it was turning back to the Jewish law. Like, you have to be circumcised. You have to, in order to gain this righteousness that was freely given. That's not right if you add to the gospel. And like, what I love about your story is like, it highlights that in a different direction, but it's a good reminder for people who struggle with legalism as well. Like, I think it was Tim Keller that said, like, obedience for the wrong reasons is still disobedience.
Yeah.
And like, you can be not putting your identity in other things. You can be not, seeking other avenues outside of the church, but like making your service an idol.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So like, it really, I think we can carry shame in our stories about different things. And it's like, well, you can look a certain way and your heart can still not be in the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like the crux of that for me, when I think about times of my life where I'm tempted, and still to this day, to put my identity in places it's not
Yes.
supposed to be, is like almost always I don't really know what he's asked of me. I
Yeah.
don't really know I'm not really focusing on what's required of me, because like even for you, like you're thinking like it's required of me to be like my siblings.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that what Jesus asked?
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, when I go to the world, and it reminds me of that like age old serpent in the garden. Like, did
I
God
was
really
just
say?
thinking the exact same thing,
Yeah.
because that's like so huge. And that's exactly where my mind was at, was the serpent in the garden of, and like, did God really say not that this wasn't good? Like, did he really say that the tree, like the fruit is,
Yeah.
you know, and he's like planting that seed of doubt. Like,
Yeah.
is God really wanting what's best for you in
Yeah.
this? And they were like,
Right.
you know,
Well, and like to that point, like I had never noticed until a few years ago when I was writing on that for part of my book, that like part of her problem was that she didn't know what God asked of her.
mm-hmm.
Because when she responds, she says, we can't even touch it. Well, so like in her mind, he's required actually more of her than
Mm-hmm.
he's asked.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
You know, like that can cause you to reach outside of his presence when you think he's asked you to do more than actually what's required of you.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
like he says, come to me, all who are,
Yes.
you know, burdened and
Yeah.
heavy laden. Like
Yeah.
he says, like, I'm gentle and lowly in heart.
Yeah.
Like, but we don't, oftentimes when we walk away, it's because we don't really believe he's gentle and lowly in heart.
Yeah. And now I love, like, in my life, to go on more with that story of like
Yeah.
the serpent in the garden. But when God comes down and they're hiding and they're covering themselves, and you know, he's God, he knows. But the
Yeah.
first thing he says, like, he's like, where are you? He knows where they are. And then he
Yeah.
says, who told you this? Like,
Yes.
who told you, like, that you were naked? Why do you know? And I just love that. And I feel like that's something else that we can all put into every aspect of our life, and especially into adulthood. There are many things from my childhood and my teenage years that I've had to learn to heal from. And I love that question of who told you this? And that's just kind of go back to the source, you know, like, when did you start to believe that your identity had to be in this other person? When did you start to believe that you had to, you know, live up to the expectations of everyone around you? When did you start to believe, you know, and go back to that source, because that's where freedom is found, is when did you start to believe this, and realizing that was a lie, like that wasn't the truth, and then replacing that lie with the truth, you know. And I know I still have to do that with things, like even in my marriage. 100%. It's like, when did I start to believe that like I have to be satisfied, and like Reeves has to like tell me this every single day, you know, just like little things. It's like, when did I start to believe, you know? And it's going back to that first time, like that first moment, and realizing, no, that was a lie. That was not the truth, and here is the truth, you know?
Isn't that crazy? And I had never noticed that was his first question after "Where are you?" is, who told you were naked? Because what's so interesting is obviously they feel like it's appropriate to feel shame when we've sinned. But the cross takes that condemnation. So like, you know, like I've heard someone say before, like, I'll always regret that, but I don't feel the shame and guilt for it. Like, and that was such a good way of saying that. Like, but what's so interesting is the first thing they pinpoint is feeling shameful about is their lack in limitation, which is their unclothed state. But they were in their unclothed state when he deemed it very good. And like, but all of a sudden now you have the knowledge of good and evil. Now you realize what you're lacking. Now you realize like your insufficiency. Whereas before that didn't bother you, but he deemed you very good then. And so like we see in the garden, even before they had need of a savior, they always needed a God, you know? But we, you know, shame blurs a lot of lines.
So good.
Okay. So diving into identity and just kind of that, okay, like I'm rejecting the pressure that I feel over here. I'm diving into this. And just kind of like, how did that, like at first, did that seem promising? When did that start to shift where it was like, actually, this feels like a lot of pressure. This feels exhausting and lead to maybe numbing. What did that like process look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, again, in high school, I was still doing both. I was still living in both, like for the Lord, and also for myself. And I remember my mom always telling Elise and I both, and my brother, because we did start serving from such a young age, she said, you can't do both, like she was kind of clear about it. Like, you can't do both. Like, you can't serve the Lord and yourself as well. Like, you need to pick. And it was kind of like, if you're gonna want to live for the world, then live for the world. And if you're going to want to live for the Lord, live for the world. And she always made that very clear to us. And so I always had that in my mind. Like, it always, again, like the truth was always there, and so I always remember her saying that. And so while I was living that double life, it always was running through my mind of, I'm doing both, because it's clear in scripture. The Lord says, if you're lukewarm, he'll spit you out of his mouth. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was very, very lukewarm. And so when I got to college I moved away. I only moved like 45 minutes down the road, an hour down the road, but moved away, moved into my first apartment. And I remember really, I kind of was like, okay, like mom always said, don't do both. So I'm not going to do both, and I'm choosing the world. And so I just pretty much decided then, I was like, let's see what this college life has to offer, And so I did. I just dove headfirst into the world of drugs, party, alcohol, sex, like all of it. I was living in it. And I can looking back now, I can fully say that it was such an empty, such a lonely, such a just broken time in my life. And that's when the numbing just kind of came in, because I think anyone who has been in a season like this or who lives like this even currently, you can admit that it is lonely, it's heartbreaking, it is not satisfying. It's not. And that's what you're seeking for. You're seeking to satisfy the hole that's like longing for more. But I truly believe if you even just admit it to yourself, even if you're still in it, it's not satisfying. It will never satisfy. And so that's just the lifestyle that I began to live, though. And so with the knowledge that it's not satisfying me, I continued to choose it, because at this point I had also started to believe, oh, I'm too far gone now. Like, there's no turning back. I've already made this choice. And again, it goes like, no one told me that. No one like said that to me, but it was the lies in my head that I had created, that the enemy was telling me, that I was too far gone. There's no chance. Like, there's no redemption here for me,
You're hiding in the garden.
I was hiding. I just felt like there was no redemption. And I was in a relationship when I began college, and it was just not healthy. It was very broken, very filled with sin in every single way. And again, all of my identity was in that. And so then I remember, even in the midst of that relationship, it was very broken, and I clearly did not have a true relationship with Jesus, because my life did not show the fruit of that at all. But even in the midst of that, I remember there would be times that I would say, God, like, if you're listening, like, you have to help me. Like, is this really about to be what my life is? I was like, is this really going to be the life that I have? Like, I grew up seeing love, like, in a home. Like, I grew up loving my siblings, and I grew up going to church, and I was like, is this really the life that I'm about to live? Because I felt like it had to be, I felt stuck, honestly. If I'm being honest, like, I felt stuck. And I just remember being like, if you're listening, like, I need you to help me. Like, if this is my life, I need you to help us. And if this isn't going to be my life, if this isn't going to be the man, I need you, God, to like help me. And he did. Even still, he still knew where I was, like, he still heard me. Even in the midst of that sin and shame, he still heard me. And so, and that's a huge part too, I feel like I missed, because I did give my life to the Lord when I was 7 years old. And I do believe he started a good work in me then. Like, I fully believe that, because as I look back now on every part of my story, he was in it with me. Like, he truly was. I wasn't fully surrendered to him, but I see him in every single detail now. But he heard that prayer, and that relationship ended. And which you would think, okay, great, like, this is the turning point. But it honestly was just before rock bottom, honestly. And so you would think that. And even after that relationship, I remember the day after we broke up, I was in my bed, devastated, just heartbroken, crying to my mom. And I was just thinking my life was over. And And I remember getting on Pinterest, and I saw like this just quote. It just said, "Today I choose joy." And I just thought, okay, like this is what I'm going to do today. And I screenshotted it and I put it as the lock screen on my phone. And I said, I want to choose joy. And I remember my mom even being like, you know where that joy comes from. Like, and I did. I knew the joy came from the Lord. And I remember I even have it in my notes. I wrote a prayer down that morning of like, Lord, like, give me joy. Like, I want to live for you, Jesus. Like, I want to be all in with you. I wrote the prayer down. And then the next day though, I got up and I went back to what I was comfortable in. And I went back to college. I went back to my apartment, and again, I just dove back into the world, knowing like I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was running in the wrong direction, but I dove back into the world. And that really led to even more heartache and pain and hurt that has had, again, years of healing. And because even still, like, there's so much redemption, but there's still pain and consequences for the sin that you choose to live in, and so that just was another season of, at this point, my identity was not in a man anymore because the man had left,
Right.
And so then where's my identity? I didn't know. It was in everything and anything. And so I just was partying. I wanted to just numb everything because I was so depressed. I was so lonely. I was so anxious. And I felt alone, even though I was surrounded by people.
Right.
I was, I was doing life with people, but I was so alone because I was so just covered in my sin. I felt just like covered in darkness, and I knew it. That, like, I still, like, that's what I go back to now. I knew it. And the Lord, in his like kindness and his like gracious heart, he was with me still. And that was just like, it just still blows my mind. Like thinking of nights that I would come home and I was so hungover, I didn't even remember getting home. Like, I'd wake up in my same clothes from the night before, like makeup smeared down my face. And I would wake up and I would have worship music playing on my phone. And I would wake up and be like, like, this is just odd. And it was always the same song.
Really?
Yes, it was always the same song.
What was it?
It was Upper Room by Taya.
Okay.
It's not a popular song either. And I still, if I listen to it now, I still cry. Like, I get emotional because I just believe that was the Lord, like, showing me I'm still here, and like the first words of that song are, "Help me, Holy Ghost. Like, I need you more than anything." And I would just wake up to that every single morning, and it would be on repeat. Like, I would have put it on repeat. So it's only that song. And I just, now when I look back, it just makes me smile because I'm like, he really was there even when I was running. Like, he didn't turn his back on me one time, know?
Yeah.
It's just, it's overwhelming to think of how loving and forgiving, and he was always there, you know?
Yeah, that just gives me chill bumps, just like that in the darkness, like in your subconscious, you would still reach out, know?
Yes.
What do you think, like, do you think the reason, like, when you're awake and you're sober, you weren't reaching out, like, was because of your shame, or because, like, well, maybe I can still do this myself, maybe I can still find this satisfaction in the world? Like, what do you think that was? Maybe both.
Yeah, I think I had kind of gotten to a place, especially which is so silly because I had prayed to God that he would take away this thing that I did not want, and then when he took it away, I got angry at him. I still, like, it was what I knew I needed and what I ultimately wanted, but I still got angry because I was like, why would you do this? Like, why would this be the answer? This thing, this person that I put everything in, I thought this was going to be it. I felt like it had to be it. Like, I truly had convinced myself of that. Like, it has to be him. If it's not him, it's no one else. And so when he took it away, it was such a good thing, but I got angry at him almost. And I thought, and which is, again, so silly because he had truly answered that prayer. But I was angry at him, and I thought to myself, he's not listening. He doesn't care for me. He does, like, I've already messed it all up too much. Like, there's no point in bringing anything else to him. There's no point in turning back to him, because what is he going to do?
Well, and like even when you're walking with him, it can feel like really scary to surrender those parts. You're like, are you going to take this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, see this all the time with moms and their kids.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, how do you think you got those blessings? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like from his good hands, you know, and
absolutely.
don't you think he has good plans? But like people have free will, and life is hard. And so there is just this element of fear of like, can I trust you?
Yeah.
You know, like, do you have good for me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's a really good like point. Thank you for sharing that. So that's kind of the first half of college. Was there anything I missed there before going into this kind of the second portion?
I don't think so.
So you kind of hit on, you know, you wanted to choose joy. You know, we can see this thread in your story of like, you're wanting to seek him. Even when you're drunk, you're reaching for him in a capacity.
Yeah.
And like, when did that start to shift of like, okay, this is not working out?
Yeah.
Was there a conscious thought? Was it just like, well, I'll go to church? Like, what did that look like at first?
So, and throughout all of this, I wasn't consistently going to church, but I would, you know, randomly pop in. You know, I would just randomly decide, this is a good Sunday to wake up and go.
Yeah.
And so I was, and anytime I would go, I remember almost every single week I was just crying. Like it didn't even really matter what the message was. I was just crying.
Yeah.
And so I really was just living in all of this sin. And there was just this one moment where I decided, I'm going to call this girl, one of my friends that I had worked with previously. I didn't even really know her, but I knew that she had a relationship with the Lord, and I could see that. And I was like, I wonder if they're going to Passion. And so I also, I don't know if everyone knows what Passion is, but it's a conference for young adults. And I had gone to Passion every single year since I was 17. So I love Passion. And so I didn't know who was going that year though, and I obviously was not living with people who were going to a Christian conference like that. And so I called this girl and I was like, hey, like, are you going to Passion this year? And she was like, yes, I'm going, me and Summer, and it was Elizabeth, my friend Elizabeth, and Summer. And she said, you should come with us. And I was like, okay, like, sure, I'm coming. And they knew that I was crazy. Like, they knew I was like wild and crazy. But they
hang up and pray.
Yeah, they were like, Lord, do something in her life. And then, so they were like, come with us. Yeah. And so that was my first like step of like boldness to like reach out myself, like, cause that's scary, you know, to have to do. And cause I remember
now I'm accountable cause I've told him
I'm going. Like, and I remember thinking like, God, like I want friends who will push me to you. Like cause it's so true that the people you hang out with are that's what you're going to look like. That's what you're going to be doing. And so I was like, I just need people, Lord, who are going to be like true friends, who are going to push me to you. And so I went to Passion, and I truly experienced the Lord in a way like never before. I mean, it was incredible. Still to this day, get chills when I think about it. Like, this sounds so silly, but it was like the first time in my life, like I just worshiped, and I felt him, and I knew he was with me, and I knew he saw me. And that was just overwhelming. I just remember just crying, tears down my face. Like, I was just overwhelmed thinking like, you still love me. This was, all I've done is run from you. All I've done is turn from you, but you've been here the whole time. And it's like, it hit me like, he's here. He heard me then. He hears me now. He loves me still. And
what a beautiful message for a young girl who thought like she couldn't measure up. Yeah. Even before that, you know, like there's nothing I could do to perform enough or be enough, you know, like, and
it was never about
even
me.
After all this time. Yeah.
I feel like that's what like hit me, was like, it's never been about me. It's been about you and your work on the cross, and the fact that you chose me. Like, you know, it was overwhelming. And then I would love to say that was it, like that was done again. But I remember when we got home from Passion, the fear kind of came back of like, okay, now what? Like, so now you've experienced God, like now you've seen him and all of his goodness, you know he's here, but now what? Like, there's no way you're going to stop living this lifestyle. You know, there's no way your friends are going to believe you that you've changed. There's no way. Yeah. And so that fear came in of like, now like action has to actually take place, you know?
Right.
And I remember I got home and I like deleted all my social media and, you know, I was like, I'm done. Like, no more FOMO. I'm not doing any of this anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I deleted it for a while. And so this was in January of 2020. And then there were a couple of times that I fell back down and went out and had way too much. Like, and honestly, it was in February of 2020. My last hoorah, I went out one more time, and it was just a terrible night, like just really bad. And the next morning I woke up, and at this time those girls I went to Passion with were still like, they were checking in on me, you know, loving me. Yeah. And I woke up one morning in February of 2020, and I remember just looking at myself in the mirror. And I was in my clothes from the night before, just tears like staining down my face, makeup, because I always cried. And I just looked at myself in the mirror, and I remember thinking, this isn't going to be it. Like, this isn't your story. This isn't the story that he wants for you. Like, and I just remember feeling that so just deeply, like, this isn't the story that God wants for me. Yeah. And I remember believing it for the first time. And I just started crying, and I just fell to my knees. And for the first time in my life, I said, God, take it all away. Like, I want to surrender everything to you. I want to surrender my fears. I want to surrender my insecurities, my anxieties. I want to surrender it all to you, because I trust that you can hold them, and I trust that you can handle them. Yeah. And I feel like that was something that I had always struggled with, was trusting that he could actually handle all of my mess. Yeah. And then in that moment, it was looking in that mirror, I saw Jesus instead of seeing myself. And that was when I realized he can handle it. Like, it's again, it's not me, it's him. Like, he's already handled it, you know? And then,
when we want to say our sin is too much, it's like saying his grace isn't sufficient. My sacrifice was in vain.
Yes. You know? It's like, it is overwhelming in the most beautiful way of like, what a mighty God, like what a mighty Savior, that his grace is sufficient for me. Yeah. And it was, I mean, that moment, again, like, I wasn't perfect after that. I'm still not perfect to this day, you know, but everything changed, because for the first time in my life, I believed, you are my Savior. You can, like, you are sufficient, and I know you can handle me. And I asked him to forgive me for the first time, and I meant it, you know. Right. So everything changed that day in February of 2020. Wow. Truly, like, it was from death to life. Yeah, you know.
It's amazing. What did that look like for you with your relationships that you'd been fostering? Like, did it look like, I'm just thinking about the people who are like, okay, I'm listening to Lydia's story, that's where I'm at. Like, whatever situation it is, like, that's where I'm at. Even if it's not parting, like, I know these relationships I have aren't beneficial. Did that look like distance for a while? Did it look like trying to still foster those? Like, what was that like for you?
I feel like that was something I struggled with, because like, the people I did life with, yes, we were living in sin, but I loved and still love those people. Yeah. Because they were hurting too, you know. Yeah. And that's the reality, is we were all hurting together. Yeah. And so I still love them. And I remember, like, I just knew, though, there was going to have to be a distance. And I just knew, like, I'm not going to be able to go to that house anymore, because that's not going to help me in my walk towards Jesus. And so, I honestly, it was a blessing for me, but gave my life to the Lord in February of 2020. And then in March of 2020, we all know what happened. The world shut down. Yes. And so I know that was awful for a lot of people, and it was hard for my family too. But for my walk with the Lord, honestly, it was the biggest blessing, because I'm fearful of how am I going to not. And I remember thinking, God, like, you're going to have to help me. And then the world shuts down. And so I had to move back home to my parents' house. And in that time, I truly was able to restore that relationship, which they had always loved me so well throughout all of this. I will say, if my parents, they did an incredible job of loving a messed up child. They really did such a good job. And but I went home, and so I mean the world shut down, so there was natural distance there. And in that time I was truly able to dive into the word and dive into Jesus. And so he was continuing to just, I remember my prayer was just like, Lord, like change the desires of my heart. Like, I don't want to want this anymore. I don't want to want drinking. I don't want to want attention from boys. I don't want to want this, that, whatever it is, fill in the blank. I just remember saying, I want to want you more, which I feel like is such a tongue twister word, or a weird sounding like prayer, but that was my prayer, and it still is my prayer to this day at times. Like, I want to want you, Jesus, more than blank.
But I feel like that's such a powerful message for any person anywhere, because whatever it is, like we said, like your idol can be a good marriage. It can be a good thing. It can be a ministry. Like, it can be so many things, but it's like asking him to change your desires. Like, we don't, like, self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. You cannot even have self-control without his Spirit doing the work. And like, when we realize that, because so many people are like, well, I just don't desire that. Well, the flesh doesn't, and that, but you even having, like, being able to recognize that at that point, to pray that, I feel like was gracious and kind of him, like, in your life, because that's, like you said, something I'm going to be praying for my whole life for different things,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, because like I said, I'm still praying that prayer today. Like, I want to want you more, because like you said, I feel like you can hear this story and hear a lot of stories and think, oh, well, like, that's big stuff. Like, that's big bad stuff that you're praying to not want. But the good stuff too. Like, if that takes place over Jesus, if that takes place over your desire for him, then that's sin too. Even the
rest.
Good.
Like, he commands us to rest. Like, he leads us to rest. But like, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I kind of want this rest more than I want to sit in your presence. And like, that's not right. B, it's not going to be refreshing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, resting apart from you. But I mean, anything.
Yeah. That's just like,
yeah. So you surrender. When did you move back to Ruston?
After this?
Yeah.
So COVID, moved home, and then moved back to Ruston it was in 2020, but that fall, moved back.
When things kind of opened up and stuff.
When school started back.
You get plugged into a church, your own church, which I'm sure was like because your family was not at the same church, right?
No. Yeah.
So I'm sure that was like, okay, this is my own, like, in some ways, like, I'm taking responsibility of my own faith here.
It was. It 100% was. Like, I felt like it was my own, like, again, because and we're back at the church with my family now, which is amazing, incredible. But at that time, I feel like that's what I needed, because I had grown up always like the little sibling of like, these are my parents, which such a blessing. I'm not saying that in a negative light. Yeah. But I feel like at that time I needed that, because all I was to those people was just Lydia, the girl who served, like, you know what I mean? So it was like, this is my faith. Like, this is, it was special. Like, I needed that in that season.
Well, and I'm like, I think that's encouraging for people to hear, because that probably wasn't true for anyone's thoughts towards you.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But if that would have been so loud to you that you wouldn't have been able to hear the Lord, what he had for you, then like, that wouldn't have been worth it. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it is just kind of good to distance yourself from like your insecurities, even, just, you're like, I can just hear you, like, silence the distraction. So I think that's awesome. So you get plugged in there. Then did you graduate that semester?
No, it was my last year of college. So 2020, I graduated in May of 2021. So it was my last year.
Yeah. So did that year just look like, okay, learning new rhythms? Like,
absolutely.
What did that kind of season look like? And then when did you get plugged into Camp Chioka?
Okay. So I got plugged in at church, and at this point, again, I had like 6 months at home to just kind of make a foundation of like, this is what I believe, and I'm not going to run away from this again. Like I had actually, for the first time, like I had placed a foundation in my life. And,
which it can like, even scientifically can take like 6 months to a year to 2 years for like your brain to heal from like substances and stuff, you know? So it's like, I can imagine like, you're literally like building spiritual habits, but also like new neural pathways, like that match that.
And I knew it was going to be hard. Like I knew going back to the place that I had lived in so much sin and pain in, I knew it was going to be hard. But I just knew that I needed to surround myself with people who were chasing after the same thing as me. And I needed to just continue to pray that the Lord would be my strength, because on my own, I would never and could never have enough strength to resist or to, to change. And so it was truly all him. But I, pretty early on in that semester, that quarter, I was plugged in at church, and our young adults ministry had a young adults retreat out at Camp Chioka. And that was the first time I'd been to Camp Chioka. I'd grown up here my whole life, but I'd never gone to camp. And one of my best friends was dating a guy. And so this was like the first time we were all going to kind of intermingle, like his friend group and my friend group. And so we all get there and we meet. And that was the first time I met Reeves, who is my husband now. And
plot twist.
Yeah, plot twist. And so I met Reeves, and I remember that first night we like went up, because he lived on Camp Chioka's property, because he worked out at Camp Chioka for years. And we went up to his house and all hung out. And I just remember thinking, he's so cute, and like, he's such a great guy, and just kind of but not thinking anything like, I was just like, this is going to be fun. Like, this could be our friend group, like thinking that kind of way of like, this is going to be a fun time. Like, we're going to have a lot of fun memories, a lot of, and then that's really what happened, was like, we all met, and then it was just like hanging out every single day, and just good fun, like going out to Camp Chioka and just hanging out and going on walks and going to his house and watching funny YouTube videos. And this is like our whole friend group, not just the Reeves and I.
Right.
Just all of us. We just got super close, like super close, super fast. And we all loved the Lord, and we were all pursuing the Lord, which was why I think we just connected all so quickly. And
what a beautiful like prayer request for what you desired going into Passion. You know, like not only did you have that in that original group of girls, but like now like he's grown that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It was so sweet. And then I won't give too many details in this because our story is a long one, but it's my favorite. But not too long after that, a few months later, because I met Reeves in September of 2020, and then in December of 2020, Reeves, being who he is, if you know Reeves at all, he's very bold
with what he likes and what he doesn't.
Yes, he's very bold with what he likes and what he doesn't like. And he left work one day, which at this time I was being discipled by a woman, and he was being discipled by her husband. So we were being discipled by a couple.
Wow.
And and he left work and he drove to my house in Ruston.
Yeah.
And at this time it was still Zoom, like classes because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I was like in my room on a Zoom call, and he walks into my room and he was like, "I need to talk to you." And I was like, okay, like, all right. And I just like mute my Zoom call, and he just lays it all out there. And he's like, "I am in love with you. You are the most amazing woman I've ever met. Like, I want this to be more. I would love to take you on a date. Like, I really would love to just see where this could go."
The date came after the profession of love.
And he's like, "I would love to take you on a date. Like, we could just go get coffee or something." Like, and I just remember sitting there just like, what?
And I don't know what I'm saying yes to in this cup of coffee. Yeah.
And then he spoke. He laid it all out there, and then he said, "I'm not expecting a response right now. I just had to let you know. Bye." And he just left, and I was like, okay. And he was like, "Okay, well, I'll see you at church tomorrow night." I was like, okay. Okay. And I was like panicking, and my friend was like in the shower, and I like opened the bathroom door, and I was like, Summer. And she was like, he told you he loves you. Like she knew, because she was like, I've known he liked you.
That is
and
so
then,
funny.
Long story short, for that part of the story, I ended up friend zoning him at that time.
I was thinking like it probably felt scary too, because finally you have this like group of friends and everything's going well.
Yes.
And like, what if this doesn't go well? I've been through bad breakups.
Yes.
And then it ruins everything.
And that's what I told him. I was like, I cherish your friendship so much more than I would a relationship at this time.
Mm.
And because I loved him. I just didn't, it was, at that time, I loved him as my friend, because that's what I needed was, and truly from the moment I met Reeves, he showed me what a godly man could look like and should look like from the moment we were friends to now married. Like he always was the first man who really showed me what like a godly man could look like. And I remember even thinking that, and like, I want my husband to be just like Reeves Walker, you know? Yeah. And at that time, I just didn't know it was going to be him.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that like so interesting that like when you haven't had a relationship ever look like that, you're looking at this person who has all of these qualities of being a godly man, but you're like, but once we enter into the relationship, it's going to look like this, because this is what relationships look like.
Yeah.
You know, because in your mind, you're just like, this is my experience. This is what, you know, it's going to be like, but it's not, you know, but you only know what you know.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
How many times can I say, you know? You know?
I know, I'm the same way.
So, okay, you friend zone him.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go after that?
Well, I friend zoned him, and he was very respectful. He said, I understand, like, thank you for being clear. And so then in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to lose this friendship. Like, you know, it was like huge. It really was so important to me. And so I was still just like, hey, you want to go get lunch? Hey, you want to, you know? Yeah. And he eventually, about a month later, he called me one afternoon, like one Sunday afternoon. He said, Lydia, you know I care about you, but you have to give me space. Like, you have to stop reaching out, because I do care about you. And because one of his big things was, he's like, I love being your friend, but we can't be friends like this forever, because one day, if it's not me, a man is going to come into your life, and that's going to have to be your best friend, and vice versa. Like, one day, if it's not you, a woman's going to come into my life, and she'll be my best friend, and that can't be you. And I remember when he said that, like, that hurt my heart to think about. Like, you know, I was like, but you're my best friend. Like, we're gonna be best friends. And so he called me though, and he said, I need you to give me space. And I said, okay, like, I will. I understand that. I respect that. And so at this time, I was still going to the woman who was discipling me, and he was going to his, and they were both kind of like telling us, you know, the same thing. Like, if it's meant to be like the Lord's timing, like, it'll come back in his timing, and you can't force that to be yours, you know? Right. And so Reeves and I both talk about how much of a blessing that actually was, even if in the moment it didn't feel like a blessing. Yeah. But we needed that, because I will be the first to admit, I mean, if I had stepped into a relationship with Reeves when he first came to me, I would have put my identity in him. Again, I would have fallen back into my old habits of putting my identity in him. And I think that's what was so hard when I said no, and when he told me he needed space, was I kind of was already putting my identity in my friendship with him. And so it was in that season in between where there was space, and we were still friends. We were still friendly. I think it was in that season in between was, again, another time that the Lord was just really pruning my heart and really just pursuing me in a way that I realized it can never be anyone but you, you know. Again, like, I just was continuing to learn, like, how to fully rely on him, right? Even if there's a good thing in front of me, you know? And Reeves was the same way. Like, he also was still, the Lord was still pursuing him in a way that was so beautiful that needed to happen before we came together. Yeah. And then, like, 5 months later was when I ended up telling him, hey, I think I made a mistake. Like, because I took that time though to truly pursue the Lord. And, those feelings, just all they did was grow for Reeves. Like, all I realized more and more was this is a man that, like, I would love to have a future with, you know? And so I just felt like the Lord had made it clear, like, this is the time is now. You can go to him. And so I told him, I was like, I think, well, first he told me that his feelings had remained the same. Mm. And I said, actually, mine have changed. I think I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so we both were just kind of like, what? Like, is this about, is this happening?
So that coffee.
Yeah. So like, is this really happening? And then I was working at Camp Chioka that summer for being a camp counselor, and he worked out there full time. So he was technically my boss. So he was like, we can't date until after the summer.
Forbidden love.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, well, here's another 3.5 months of waiting, but okay. Which again ended up being incredible because the Lord did so much in my life in that 3.5 months. Yeah. Which was like crucial and incredible. Yeah. And one of those being I got baptized that summer.
At Camp Chioka, right?
At Camp Chioka, in the swimming pool of Camp Chioka. Yeah. And it was so special. And it was honestly something I hadn't really, it had crossed my mind. Mm-hmm. But we had it was about a week before camp started, maybe the weekend before camp started, which also, that requires a lot of laying down pride because I'm about to be a camp counselor, and I remember thinking, what are all these other camp counselors about to think of me? Like, oh, like if I'm just now getting baptized. Right. But I remember it was like so clear to me that I needed, because I was baptized when I was 7, but I had not surrendered my life to the Lord when I was 7 fully. I hadn't called him my Savior, my Lord and Savior. And so I knew, I was like, I want to do this for you, Jesus. Like, I want to publicly profess this to everyone. I'm not ashamed. I'm not going to be ashamed. And it was such I just didn't even question it. I was just crying. I'm an emotional person. And I was just crying, and I just said, let's go to the swimming pool. Yeah. And we went to the swimming pool, got baptized, and it was so beautiful. My parents and they weren't there again, because I truly didn't think. I was just like, it was like in scripture when it's like, you see the water, you go to the water, you do it. Yeah. I was like, let's do it. And my parents were so happy for me and so supportive. And then that summer working out at Chioka was so hard, but just so much growth in that season. And that was actually when it was in July of 2021. Working out at Camp Chioka was the first time I remember in worship one night, I felt the Lord tell me, you're going to be in ministry. Like, you're going to work in ministry. And I just remember thinking, I don't know, like, wrong girl, maybe. I'm not sure about that, Yeah. And
I just asked for a friend group, Lord.
Yeah, I was like, okay. And I called my parents, and I was like, I feel like the Lord just told me I'm going to be in ministry. And they were like, okay, like, we'll, whatever, like, who knows what that looks like. Yeah. And then now, fast forward, here we are, and it's just crazy what the Lord has done. I mean.
Yeah. So you said you started at FCA in 2021. How did you get plugged in with them?
Jeff Fitzgerald. Yeah. If you don't know him, you should. He's an awesome guy. He's hilarious. And so he was the head football coach at the high school
that's right.
I went to.
Yes. Okay.
I didn't know him, but he was the head football coach. And so I told my parents I felt called to ministry. Yeah. And my mom actually ran into Jeff.
Gotcha.
Or no. Well, yes. My mom had told people at school, like, because she was a teacher there also. Yeah. She had told people, Lydia apparently feels called to ministry now. Like, whoa, Yeah. And one of those was a coach. And the coach ran into Jeff. And Jeff was saying, because Jeff had just been called to ministry also. Right. So he had quit coaching after 22 years to step into FCA, which is very scary. Right. And so he was saying, I need someone else. Like, I need a partner. Like, I can't do this, And that coach was like, Miss Dozier's daughter said that she feels called to ministry. Yeah. It's so funny now because Jeff said his first reaction was like, not Lydia. Like, because he knew me as, like, like who I was. So he was like, I don't know about that one. Yeah. But then he ended up, like, feeling like, he felt like maybe so. And he ran into my mom and he said, Miss Dozier, I need your daughter's number. And he got my number and he called me. And I didn't answer the first time because I was like, why is he calling me? Yeah. And then called me again.
That's hilarious.
And he called me again. And then it just kind of happened from there. Like, honestly, FCA was scary and very intimidating to me.
Yeah.
I knew the Lord was calling me to ministry, and I knew in my heart, I knew I wanted to be able to work with girls who have and are experiencing what I experienced in life, and the same feelings and the same struggles. And so I knew that, but FCA was very intimidating to me. And I honestly tried to say no. Like, I honestly was like, I just don't know if this is it. And the Lord just continued to open the doors to make it clear, like, this is where I have you. Like, this is where I want to use you. And he did. He made it very clear.
Wow.
Like, he had the doors. The one phone call Jeff was calling me, I fully intended to say, I don't think that this is it for me. Like, I think that, I'm going to keep looking elsewhere. And by the end of that phone call, he had pretty much told me I'm hired.
Yeah.
And I had fully accepted it. And I remember getting off the phone call that time and just like,
I think I didn't say no.
What just
happened?
I'm
employed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was just 100% the Lord, though. And such a blessing. Like, incredible to look back at what he has done. Yeah. It's just incredible.
That's wild. And when did you and Reeves get married? Was that before you started?
No, so Reeves and I actually started dating right around that time.
Okay.
That I started working for FCA. Also, we started dating that August. So camp ended.
Yes.
We went on the date. We finally went on our date, and it was so good. Yeah. And we started dating in August, and we didn't get married until December of the next year.
Okay, gotcha.
So we dated for a year.
Yeah.
Got engaged and married 3 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know.
I love it though. Well, okay, I would love for you to talk about, I know you've got stuff to do, so I don't want to keep you all day, but I would love for you to talk about the work you get to do with LO Worship, because I know that's a big part of y'all's life, but also like the importance of discipleship. Yes. So whichever one of those you want to tackle first.
Okay, absolutely. I feel like it's just, I get overwhelmed at how God chooses to use me and how he wants to use everyone in that way. Yeah. Because I work for FCA, yes. And so discipleship, like that is our mission. That is our goal. Yeah. And that's not because it's what we want to, it is what we want to do, but that's because it's so clearly, like, it's our command. Like, it's the Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, And so that's just like the biggest piece. And I actually just came off this weekend, that retreat I was telling you about. Yeah. It's called our E3 Discipleship Weekend. And it's a weekend where we get all, we had 30 college athletes from across Louisiana who come together, and it's just training for discipleship and how to go out and make disciples with biblical background. And so it's engage, equip, empower is our like motto in it, I guess. And it is just incredible to see and like to feel a part of his work in his kingdom. Yeah. And I say that again, truly, maybe it is my job, but it's all of our job. It's all of our calling to go therefore and make disciples.
Yours looks like this and this structure. Yes. This age group, but like everyone should be doing that. Yes. Seeking it. Yes. And pouring out.
Yes, exactly. And so it is just, it's my whole life. And I've even said this. I've said, at this time in my life, I believe I'll be doing FCA for as long as I can see, like that's where I'm at. But I've even said, if there's a day that like FCA isn't what I'm doing full time, or if the Lord calls me somewhere else, because you never know what he's going to do. Right. But if that day comes, I'm always going to do what I'm doing, Right. Like, and that's what I feel like is so incredible that I can say that. Like, if the day comes that like this isn't my job, like I'm never going to stop doing it.
Yeah. As a stay-at-home mom, you can still be doing that work.
Yes, because I see the importance of it, and I see the fruit of it, and I feel the calling of it, and so it's just huge. And I'm so blessed in the stories I could tell for days of the lives that I have been touched by, and the stories of girls who have, it's just incredible. It's really overwhelming and just so beautiful to see. And I'm just so grateful to be a part, because when I felt called to ministry, I had no clue what that would look like. Right. But the Lord had this plan from the beginning. He's known all along. And now to be able to use the hurts and to use the who told me that, like, and to be able to use those hard parts of my life that you said this earlier, I don't regret Or I wish
you
that
have regrets, but you don't have the shame and
yeah,
guilt
I have
of
like of course
not seeing his sovereignty.
like naturally my brain thinks,
Yeah.
oh man, like I wish I didn't have to have experienced that.
Yeah.
But because of the mindset of
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, he uses all things for good.
That's right.
Because of that mindset, I'm able to look at my hurt and the pain and everything that I walk through, everything, the worst, the darkest, the dirtiest parts of my story, I look at and I'm thankful because I see Jesus in them and I see him use them every single day. And so even, and I'm not saying that that's an easy thing. I'm not saying that I've got it all figured out and that I don't ever, but I see him in it, because he is in every single part and and he uses every single part. And so I think that has also been such a huge mindset shift of like that what he, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant it for good. And
100%.
That has been true in every season and
isn't
every
that
part.
wild? Like it is always the parts we are the most nervous or afraid or whatever to relinquish, and that can be things from your past, but it can be the things that you're, like we talked about, like you're afraid to give over, but it can just also be the parts like, there's nothing to offer here, Lord. Like, this is not important. This is not useful. I don't have a gift. Like, I don't have like it can be those things too that you're like, no, like when you put things into his hands, like,
yes,
it's the, I never can remember if it's, 2 fish and 5 loaves. It's you put it in his hand and he multiplies that, but like we have to do the surrender part,
Yes. Yeah.
And that's so good.
And then Ella worship.
Yeah. Yes.
So that also, Reeves was a part of it before me. And I just kind of wanted to, there was a trip they were going on and I was like, I want to come. Like, can I come with y'all to Nashville? They're like, come on. And then I just slowly but surely, it was such a God thing. I just slowly but surely just kind of started to become a part. And I'm so grateful to be a part now, just to see the work that the Lord does in that. And to see something I was so passionate about from such a young age, but that I had kind of lost because it was never genuine and pure in that young age. Worship just never, it was a show. It really was when I was young. And then to see the Lord's redemption in that area too, of like getting to use me now in this way, is just so beautiful. And I'm so grateful. And to be a part of this ministry with my husband and with my best friends, like, it is so beautiful. And just to like, because the kingdom of God, like the body of believers, it's truly family, and so it's so special because I just feel like my family has just expanded and expanded because I have my FCA family, I have my LO worship family, I have my church family. It's just, the body of believers is just such a beautiful blessing in every way, but like, have so many family members, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's just so special to get to do life with family, and that it truly feels like
and
that.
And again, with an age and a group, like thinking about LO conference, like, with this group that you feel called to serve, and like the Lord's like, oh, you don't think you can serve? Well, you're going to do this in 2 different areas. I mean, that's just so neat.
It's so neat. It's so special. I just feel so honored and blessed because like, it is nothing of my own power, my own might. Like, it is truly Jesus in me in every area of my life. And I've said it 1,000 times, but I'll say it again. It's just, I can just see him in every single detail. And it's just the most beautiful thing, it overwhelms me. Like, his goodness just overwhelms me still to this day. And I pray I never lose that, And like, even today, I mean, life with Jesus is the most beautiful thing. And to still rely on him, to still need him in every single moment. Because I was talking to someone just a couple weeks ago and I was saying, life is full of so much joy. Like, I can truly say that my heart is full of joy because of Jesus. And I say that my life isn't easy at all times. Like, I'm
all
like,
your prayers aren't answered all the time.
No, like, life is still hard. Like, I still walk through hard stuff, like Reeves and I still walk through hard things. And yet my life is still filled with joy because of Jesus, And I feel like that's something huge to remember and just to say is like, if you hear the story and you're thinking like, well, now she's got it all together, she's got it all figured out, perfect marriage, perfect life. The reality is like, no, life is still hard, and like, we still walk through hard things, and there are still prayers that I'm praying every single day and I'm waiting on the Lord to answer. And I'm still I'm still filled with joy, though, because I know that he's good, and I know that his timing is perfect, and I know that he is with me and he hears me. And that's because of, I can look back and see that it's been true, and I know that it will remain true. Exactly. You know, and I think that's huge, because just tie it all back to that, today I choose joy. I didn't know where to find that joy. I didn't know it was only in him.
Yeah.
And now today I choose joy is actually a true statement, because today I choose Jesus every single day, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, it can feel like, even if you know he's the source of joy, you can think like, okay, well, I can seek him, but I've still got to, there's this thing in us that's like, we still have to manufacture it. Yeah. It's like, no, like when you choose him, he does that. That's a fruit of the Spirit, you know? Like, again, like that's his work, you know?
Yeah.
Lydia, thank you so much for coming and sharing. It was so good.
Thank you. It was so fun. I know. I hope it all made total sense. It wasn't jumbled.
It was amazing, and I know it is going to be so impactful. So thank you for being willing. And
thank you so much for having me.
It was awesome.
This was a joy.
Good. Today we choose joy.
Yes.
And thank y'all so much for listening in this week to The Salt Works. We will see you next week.
This is my story. This is your story.